The music pulsed through the house, a chaotic blend of laughter and clinking glasses. But I couldn't hear any of it. My world had narrowed to the man across the room, his dark eyes locking onto mine like a secret we'd both been keeping for years. By the time the night unraveled, I'd be lying awake, his warmth pressed against me, wondering how my life had come to this. It was a 4th of July party in our suburban Chicago neighborhood, the kind where everyone pretends to be closer than they are. My wife, Emily, was already 3 glasses deep into her wine, her laughter louder than the fireworks bursting outside. I stood by the kitchen counter, nursing a beer, trying to blend into the small talk about mortgages and school districts. But then I saw him, Evan. He was new to the block, a graphic designer who'd moved into the old Miller place with a quiet confidence that made people notice. His navy blazer hugged his shoulders just right. And when he smiled, it was like he knew something the rest of us didn't. "Hey, Matt," he said, sliding up beside me, his voice low and smooth. "You look like you're hiding from the party." I laughed, caught off guard. "Just, not much for crowds." He tilted his head, studying me. "Funny. You strike me as someone who's got a lot to say, just waiting for the right listener." My chest tightened. Was he flirting? Or was I reading too much into the way his gaze lingered? Emily was in the next room, swaying to some pop song, oblivious. I should have walked away, changed the subject, done anything to stop the spark I felt igniting. But I didn't. Instead, I leaned closer, letting his cologne mix of cedar and something sharper fill my senses. The night blurred on. Emily drank too much, as she often did at these things. And by midnight, she was passed out on the couch, her head lolling against a cushion. The other guests started to trickle out, leaving behind half-empty cups and crumpled napkins. Evan stayed, offering to help clean up. I should have said no, but I didn't. We moved through the house in a quiet rhythm, stacking plates, wiping counters. Every brush of his arm against mine felt deliberate, like a question he was daring me to answer. By the time we finished, the house was silent except for the faint hum of cicadas outside. Emily was still out cold, her breathing slow and heavy. "Want to get some air?" Evan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart pounding. We stepped onto the back porch, the summer night wrapping around us. The stars were bright, the air thick with the scent of grilled food and cut grass. We sat on the steps, closer than we needed to be, our knees almost touching. "You ever feel like you're living someone else's life?" he asked, staring out at the dark yard. I swallowed hard. "Every day?" He turned to me, his eyes searching mine. "What's stopping you from living yours?" The question hit like a punch. I'd spent years burying that part of myself, the part that noticed men like Evan, that craved something I'd been taught to ignore. I was 32, married, with a stable job and a mortgage. I wasn't supposed to want this. But there, under the weight of his gaze, I couldn't lie. "I don't know how," I admitted. He reached out, his hand resting on mine. His touch was warm, steady, and it sent a jolt through me. "You don't have to know how," he said softly. "You just have to start." We sat there, the space between us shrinking until there was none left. His lips found mine, tentative at first, then hungry, like we'd both been starving for this moment. The kiss was reckless, dangerous, and so alive it made my chest ache. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath ragged. "Matt," he whispered. "I've wanted to do that since the day I moved in." I couldn't speak. My mind was screaming Emily was inside. My wife. My life, but my body didn't care. I kissed him again. Harder. Letting the guilt drown in the rush of it all. We ended up in the guest room. The door locked. The world shut out. His hands were everywhere, tracing lines I didn't know I needed until they were there. We didn't sleep. We lay together, tangled in sheets, his heartbeat steady against my chest. It was the first time in years I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. As dawn crept through the curtains, he stirred, his lips brushing my ear. "Next time," he whispered, "just call me." He slipped out before Emily woke, leaving me staring at the ceiling, my heart a battlefield of guilt and longing. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I couldn't go back. The days after that night were a haze, like I was living underwater. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Evan's crooked smile, the way his fingers grazed my skin, the weight of his whispered words. But in the daylight, I was still Matt, the devoted husband, the guy who mowed the lawn and paid the bills, pretending nothing had changed. Emily didn't suspect a thing. She woke up the morning after the party with a hangover and a vague apology for drinking too much. I nodded, smiled, played the part. But every time she touched me, I felt like a fraud. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, and Evan was everywhere jogging past our house, waving from his driveway, his presence a constant pull I couldn't ignore. A week later, I saw him at the neighborhood coffee shop. He was at a corner table, sketching on a napkin, his hair falling into his eyes. I should have turned around, but my feet moved on their own. When he looked up, his smile was both an invitation and a challenge. "Couldn't stay away, huh?" he teased, pushing a chair out for me. I sat, my hands fidgeting with a sugar packet. "I shouldn't be here." "But you are," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Why?" I didn't have an answer, not one I could say out loud. Instead, I asked, "What are we doing, Evan?" He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto mine. "We're figuring it out. Together." That was the start of Itztalin moments. Secret texts. Excuses to see each other. A quick chat at the community center turned into an hour in his car. Windows fogged. Our hands intertwined. A late night errand became a walk through the park. His arm around my waist. The world fading to just us. Each time, I told myself it was the last, that I'd stop before it went too far. But every touch, every glance, made it harder to pull away. Emily started to notice. Not the truth knot yet, but the distance. "You've been weird lately," she said one night, her voice sharp as she chopped vegetables for dinner. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing," I lied, my stomach twisting. "Just work stress." She didn't push, but her eyes lingered, like she was trying to see through me. I hated myself for it, for the life I was unraveling. But I couldn't stop. Evan was a flame, and I was drawn to him, even if it meant burning everything else down. One night, I told Emily I was meeting a client. Instead, I drove to Evan's place. He opened the door, shirtless, a towel slung over his shoulder from a shower. "You're late," he said, grinning. I stepped inside, The door barely closed before I kissed him. It was desperate, like I could outrun my guilt if I moved fast enough. We ended up on his couch, the TV flickering in the background, his hands pulling me closer until there was no space left between us. "Stay?" he said after, his voice low, his fingers tracing circles on my back. "I can't," I said, but I didn't move. "Not yet." He propped himself up, looking at me with an intensity that made my chest ache. "Matt, you're not happy. You haven't been for a long time. Why keep pretending?" I wanted to argue, to defend the life I'd built, but the words wouldn't come. He was right. I'd been playing a role for years, convincing myself it was enough. But with Evan, I felt alive in a way I hadn't since I was a kid, before I learned to hide who I was. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. He cupped my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. "You don't have to be. I'm here." But fear was a shadow I couldn't shake. Every time I left his place, I drove home slower, dreading the moment I'd walk through my door and face Emily. The lies were piling up, and I knew they'd collapse soon. It happened faster than I expected. Emily found a text from Evan on my phoniest simple "miss you" that I hadn't deleted. She confronted me that night, her face pale, her voice trembling. "Who is he? Matt. Tell me the truth." I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break. The truth was a cliff, and I was standing at the edge, knowing the fall would change everything. "I'm gay," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. They hung in the air, heavy and final, like a door slamming shut. Emily stared at me, her eyes wide, her knife still in hand from chopping onions, the blade catching the kitchen light. She set the knife down slowly, her hand shaking. "What did you say?" I took a breath, my voice unsteady but resolute. "I'm gay, Emily. I've been lying to you to myself for years. And I've been seeing someone. Evan." The silence that followed was deafening. Her face crumpled, a mix of shock and betrayal, and I felt like the worst person alive. "How long?" she whispered. "A few weeks," I said, hating how small it sounded, how it didn't capture the earthquake inside me. "But it's not just about him. It's about me. I can't keep pretending I'm someone I'm not." She laughed, a bitter sound that cut deeper than anger. "So what, Matt? You're just throwing away our marriage, our life. I don't know what comes next," I said, my voice breaking. "But I can't keep hurting you by living a lie." She turned away, her shoulders shaking, and I knew I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. The next morning, she packed a bag and went to her sister's. The house felt like a ghost town, every corner echoing with the life we'd built and the truth I'd hidden. I called Evan, my hands trembling as I dialed. "She knows," I said when he answered. "It's over." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Come over." I did. We sat on his porch, the same stars above us as that first night. He didn't push, didn't ask for answers. He just held my hand, his thumb tracing slow circles, grounding me when I felt like I was falling apart. The weeks that followed were a storm. Emily and I started divorce proceedings, each meeting a fresh wave of pain. Friends took sides, some offering support, others pulling away, their judgment clear. My parents, devout and traditional, called me a disappointment, their voices cold through the phone. But Evan was there, steady and unwavering, his presence a lifeline. One night, we drove to Lake Michigan, the city lights fading behind us. We sat on the shore, the waves lapping at our feet, the air cool and sharp. I don't know if I'm doing this right, I said, staring out at the water. I've lost so much. He took my hand, his grip firm. You're finding yourself, Matt. That's not a loss. It's a beginning. I looked at him, his face softened by the moonlight, and felt something shift. For the first time, I wasn't running from who I was. I was running toward it. Months later, I moved into a small apartment downtown, a new chapter unfolding. Evan and I were careful, taking it slow, building something real amidst the wreckage. I started therapy, unraveling years of shame and fear, learning to forgive myself. Emily and I found a fragile peace, her anger softening into a sad acceptance. She deserved better, and I hoped she'd find it. One evening, Evan and I walked through Millennium Park, the beam reflecting the city's glow. He stopped, pulling me close, his breath warm against my ear. I'm proud of you, he said, for choosing you. I kissed him, right there in the open, no longer hiding. The world didn't stop. No one stared. It was just us. Two people carving out a space for love in a world that didn't always understand. As we walked away, hand in hand, I realized the truth wasn't a cliff after all. It was a Brigetto, a life I'd never dared to imagine. One where I could finally be whole. And every step, no matter how hard, was worth it.